I'm going to do a brief overview of the product itself. Our first product to market is called AutoCache. It is hypervisor-based caching. We are software that installs into the hypervisor itself in a matter of seconds. Once we're installed, we inspect all the I/O flowing through the hypervisor, and we apply adaptive caching techniques to identify which pieces of data should be moved to a solid-state storage device. We will support either SSDs or PCIe-based flash cards. We are a read cache with both write-through and write-around semantics, and we'll be talking more about that in the next section. We are absolutely transparent to the virtual machines. No guest agents, no reconfiguration of guests, no reconfiguration of your storage for those guests. We're also transparent to the storage infrastructure. So all of the investments you've made in your storage and the storage processes continue to work just the way they did prior to installing us. That includes things like replication, snapshots, offloaded hardware acceleration, such as VAI implementations. In fact, we are totally transparent to all the IT processes of the hypervisor environment itself.
It supports NFS as well as iSCSI and Fiber Channel? Or? We
support all of the data store types of the hypervisor. So yes, we support SAN storage, iSCSI, Fiber Channel over Ethernet, doesn't matter to us, NFS data stores, as well as DAS. Okay. So what type of...
Not that it would be a good idea, but does that mean that you could run on top of vSAN as well?
We can.
I like that you prefaced it with that would probably not be a good idea.
Well, we will see whether or not that makes sense long term. I actually do believe that there could be valid use cases for that configuration. All right.
Well, it's not as foolish as running a write-back cache on top of vSAN and going, I'd like to replicate my data across the network 6 times for every write.
Exactly correct. I would agree 100% with that comment. So what types of results do our customers typically see? Normal results are around 2 to 3 times virtual machine densities achieved on the exact same physical infrastructure. We actually have, broadly speaking, 2 groups of customer class. We have people that are trying to drive higher machine densities, essentially higher levels of efficiency in their hardware utilization, essentially doing more with their existing infrastructure. But we have a second class of customer, and those are customers that are actually more interested not in virtual machine density, but in application performance enhancement, particularly around business critical apps. And I like to talk about one customer in particular. In this case, we have a number of case studies that are available on our website. But we had one customer that provided a outsourcing service for large companies. And in particular, they had month-end processes that required them to run reports that they would feed back to their customers about how their service was being used. These reports that they had to run at the end of the month were taking 36 hours to run. They were run on the weekend. They were kind of running out of weekend, if you know what I mean. And in addition to taking 36 hours to run, they were so I/O intensive that they found that to run successfully, they had to vMotion off all of their workloads and dedicate the host to the single VM that was running these reports. All right, so this was a major concern for them. They brought in our solution. When they tested it, they let it run over the weekend, and we got an email following over the weekend while it was running that was essentially sort of a, oh no, we forgot to vMotion off the machines, the other virtual machines from the guest. We really don't think we're going to have anything on Monday morning. Well, much to their surprise, they came back, they checked, and not only did they run to completion with the other machines still running on the same host, they took their month-end processing from 36 hours down to 6.5 hours. So dramatic improvements on that business critical app, right? So once again, we can drive machine density, we can improve individual app performance. We're totally transparent and fully compatible with all the value-added features that people have come to expect from VMware, such as vMotion, DRS, storage DRS, high availability. We just work. We convert a very modest amount of flash into very large benefits for most customers. If I had to peg it right now, I would say that the majority of our customers, well, I could say categorically, the majority of our customers run with under a terabyte of cache. And in fact, I would say that the average is close to 500 gigabytes is the average cache size for them. And many of our customers have found that deploying our software solution along with a very modest amount of flash allows them to delay purchasing more infrastructure, be that either servers or storage. Right. We are very simple to deploy. You have to have a flash device of some sort, so you need to buy your flash. If you don't already have it, you can download our software over the internet. If you go to the Proximal Data website, there is a Try Us button. On the hosts, we are, in fact, a single VIB to install. There's no need to configure per device or per guest. There's no need to reboot during the installation of our software. On the slides, it does say that you may need to reboot if you're physically installing a PCIe card, right? You may actually have to power down if you don't have hot plug PCIe. But our software itself doesn't require a reboot. And once you've installed the flash device and our VIB, that's it. We take over and we self-tune, and you don't have to configure anything else. And literally, within about 10 minutes, people are seeing visible results. So, pricing and availability. Version 2.0 of our product, G8 at VMworld this year. We have many resellers and distributors here in the US. We have a very modest technical sales support team that supports our channel partners. We have an OEM partnership. This is something new this year with LSI. In fact, the LSI Nitro XD is a OEM of our technology.
Really?
We support ESXi 4.1, 5.0, 5.1, and 5.5. Hyper-V has been announced, and it will be shipping before the end of the year.
You don't have much time there, Rory.
I know. You're going to see screenshots. Right? We support, as previously mentioned, any back-end data store. And we have no special hooks for the actual flash storage devices. We can support any flash storage device. That said, we do have a hardware compatibility list, and we do have sort of preferred partners. The reason that we do that is because we've noticed a couple of things, and they are, there is a pretty broad spectrum in terms of performance and quality in the flash devices themselves.
In plain English, that's some of the consumer SSDs suck.
That would be another way of saying that. And just as much as there's a spectrum of quality in the hardware devices, there's probably even a greater spectrum in the actual device drivers for these devices, for the PCIe devices, with respect to ESX. Okay, so some device drivers are much better than other device drivers. And really what we want to do is we want to ensure with our hardware compatibility list that the end customer experience is a positive experience, right? And so this is less the case today than it was when we were first starting off, but when we were first starting off, it was literally the case that there were certain flash devices that when they were brand new, had great performance, and once they actually got into steady state and began garbage collecting and wear leveling, their performance would drop by over 50%. And so...
And never come back.
And never come back, that is correct. And we were very concerned that people would deploy on that type of technology, start loading more virtual machines onto their system, get great results, and then in a month have to transition those virtual machines back off as the performance degraded. And so, once again, we used our hardware compatibility list to sort of ensure that we're going to steer customers towards devices and drivers that we know work very well. Our suggested retail price starts at $1,000 per host for cache sizes under 500 gigabytes.
Is Proximal data also supported by VMware?
No, there is no direct support for any caching solution other than VFRC by VMware itself. VMware as a company is working on programs for the flash caching vendors, and they will have a certification process similar to the IOVP program for third parties, but that is not yet in place.
Okay.
I guess the flip way of saying that too, or the other thing to mention would be that we are very much engaged with VMware's engineering team, and in fact are a member of the PVSP program.
Sure. Yeah.
So, summary on the product overview. We were truly the first hypervisor-based caching solution. We were the first solution that was specifically designed for the shared resource environments, using flash as the cache device itself within the hypervisors, right? So, first to market, very innovative. We give very, very good results with a very modest amount of flash, fully transparent, very low risk to deploy. You can live install us, you can live uninstall us, low risk, cost effective. In short, we feel that we were very much the biggest bang for the buck, if you will.
So we got a question coming in. You're enhancing or decreasing latency by caching. How do you claim 2 to 3x density in VMs per host?
Yeah, that's a very good question. One of the things that we'll be talking about in the deep dive is performance and performance measurement. We shied away from making specific IOPS claims for a number of reasons. Not the least of which is many times people don't actually know what their IOP hard requirements are. And so we hit upon the notion of sort of the 2 to 3x virtual machine density results as being typical. And what it's based upon is really what are typical read versus write ratios. And so in particular, both SNIA as well as Microsoft and Hewlett-Packard have published live traces of every I/O through production servers. So Microsoft published a technical paper that was traces of every I/O through their web servers, their nightly build servers, their email servers, all their production servers within the Microsoft Corporation. HP rose to the occasion and published a trace of every I/O through one of their main development servers over an entire year. So there's a great deal of information out there about what typical real-world workloads are. And it does, of course, vary from application to application and environment to environment. But it's fairly easy to state that most environments are read-dominated environments, not write-dominated environments.
I get that, but the density in a hypervisor is mostly, the first limit you're going to hit is either memory or CPU, and I don't see the density going up twice or 3 times by lowering the latency.
Okay, so absolutely correct. If in fact you're memory bound, we can provide some relief on that. But certainly if you're CPU bound, you're CPU bound, and we're not going to provide any benefit for that. In my experience, most environments are not CPU bound in terms of their virtual infrastructure. But certainly there are
For VDI
some.
workloads, for example, CPU can be a limitation.
Absolutely. And if you're CPU bound, any caching solution isn't going to help you. If you're memory bound, caching solutions actually can help you. If you look inside the guests, for most environments, and once again, there's always going to be an exception to these rules, but if you look inside most environments, the number one consumer of RAM is in fact the block cache of the operating system itself. Okay? And the reason for that is because whereas memory and CPUs have more or less followed Moore's law and have greatly improved over the last decade, storage has not. It has in terms of density, but in terms of performance, best-in-class disks today are roughly the same performance level in terms of RPM and seek time as they were 10 years ago.
I guess we all agree on that. We were just questioning the 2x and 3x and
yeah, and so once again, if you are I/O bound, which I'm going to maintain that most people are, and if you're read dominated, you take the pressure off the read side of this equation, and you can in fact support 2 to 3 times more machines.
So are you arguing that I can reduce the amount of memory I allocate to each of my VMs because they were using that additional memory as their block cache, and therefore increase my VM density?
You can do that too, absolutely the case. However, to do that requires a configuration change. That requires work.
Yeah, and you know how I feel about that.
Same way I feel about it. All right?
Should be avoided at all costs.
There you go. Okay.